It began with the forging of the terrible movie games. E.T. was given to the elves, immortal, wisest and fairest of all beings. Fight Club went to the Dwarf Lords, great gamers and craftsmen of the mountain halls. And Charlie's Angels was gifted to the race of men, who above all else deserve suffering. For within these games was bound the strength and the will to ruin each video game generation. But they were all of them deceived, for another game was made. Deep in the land of Mordor, in the fires of Mount Doom, the Dark Lord EA forged a master game, and into this he poured his cruelty, his malice, and his will to dominate all life. One game to rule them all. The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, the video game, was released a full 2 months earlier than the film in North America. October 21st, 2002 on PlayStation 2, followed by releases worldwide on GameCube and Xbox. Interestingly, the game was developed by Stormfront Studios on PlayStation and Hypnos Entertainment for the later ported releases on other consoles, all of which were published by EA Games. Now you might be thinking, where is the Fellowship of the Ring game? Why start with The Two Towers? Well, we owe that little conundrum to Vivendi Game Studios, who held the video game license to J.R.R. Tolkien's literary works. This meant a few things. Number one, Vivendi, with Sierra being the developer, was making a Fellowship of the Ring game based on the book, as they had no rights to anything that was depicted solely in the films. Number two, EA, conversely, could only release a game as long as everything in it was at some point depicted or based on things in the films. Both of these were being developed at roughly the same time as each other. And in fact, the Fellowship of the Ring game released only a couple of weeks later than its far better received EA Games cousin. Just in case you're wondering, the Fellowship of the Ring game is straight up
not good!
The Two Towers video game includes a lot of content from the Fellowship of the Ring film, partly because the game based on the first film was initially being planned by EA, but failed to come together in time. So just to be clear, that's 2 Lord of the Rings games, both released in North America in October 2002, both of which feature plots and characters from the Fellowship of the Ring, and both of them were released to multiple platforms. For me, The Two Towers was an absolute favourite game of mine when I got to play it on the GameCube. Whilst I was a Lord of the Rings fan, it wasn't the game's filmic influence that made me come back to the game so much. Instead, I was drawn to its compact, levelling up system and rewarding replayability. EA's J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, the video game has 3 characters to play as, plus a 4th secret character. Foreshadowing is a narrative device in which the story we have Aragorn, Legolas, and my personal favourite, Gimli.
Here comes the boy, hello boy, welcome, there he is,
He's here. Each of the characters play with the same controls, and yet the combo animations, damage, and speed of each character were different. In a nutshell, there were 12 missions in the game, each of them being based on some part of the Fellowship of the Ring or its sequel. But really, what does this completely mad gaming masterpiece tell us about the story of J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings? If you hadn't seen the films or never read the books, could you follow along?
EA Games.
challenge everything.
And here we go into a much abridged version of the Fellowship of the Ring prelude.
I feel it in the water.
I'm just gonna fast forward this bit. And here we are in the game. No main menu here, yet. If you didn't have a save game in your memory card, here's where you end up. Now, I already have 2 questions. Who are we playing as currently? And what are we fighting? But that aside, this is a great introduction to the flow of the game. They teach you stabbing, slashing, kicking, parrying. At this point, we essentially learn how to fight. So that being said, let's quickly go over the controls just so you understand what's happening. So the A button quick swipes, they're your bread and butter of the game. 60% of the time they work every time. Y button is your heavy attack. It breaks shields, it does a little bit more damage, there's a slow build up, but it does work. X button is just to kick them. It forces enemies to stop and think about their life just for a second. The B button is to parry. You're not going to be using this an awful lot, but there are a few scenarios in the game where it's useful. R button is to stab the floor, or finish off enemies that are lying on the floor. It's useless most of the time unless you're doing certain combos. The L button, you just hold it down to, and then press A button to... If you're playing as Legolas, you're going to use this a lot. If you're playing as Gimli, instead of a bow and arrow, you're going to lob an axe. Now you might be asking, are there any camera controls? No, there's no camera controls at all. The GameCube controller does have another stick, the C stick. All this does is do the attacks for you when you push a direction. Anyway, with that out of the way, we kill enough enemies, we then come to a cutscene. We're swiftly brought to our new character, Aragorn. We have absolutely no explanation of what is happening. Those of us that are Lord of the Rings fans will know we're kind of jumping around the timeline a lot. It looks like Aragorn is recalling parts of what happened in the Fellowship of the Ring to Éowyn after he returns from his supposed death on the cliffside fall. So, moving on to level 2. The ring wraiths are here, and we have to protect the ring bearer. We assume it's this dude. This level is excruciatingly simple. All you need to do is light your torch on fire by going to the fire and pressing Y, and then attack the ring wraiths with your lit torch by pressing Y again. Keep pressing Y, that's all you have to do on this level. After a minute or two, another cutscene plays and we learn that the ring bearer is called Frodo. What Frodo then does is put on the ring, turn invisible, which doesn't actually hide him from the ring wraiths, and then get stabbed. What you then have to do is protect Frodo for a few more minutes with your outstanding ability to press Y, and you win. We then get one of my favourite cutscenes. We then get a fantastic and incredibly subtle transition from movie scene to in-game cutscene. And I love this quote from the IGN review. Instead of changing FMV to in-game models at the normal juncture, the FMV clips merge into in-game scenes before the game starts, sustaining the level of disbelief, carefully fooling you into believing you're now playing the movie. The effect works brilliantly. So despite being there in the cutscene, Gandalf has now fucked off somewhere. Compared to some later missions, this one is relatively short. Goblins are the main enemies of choice. We have the swordsmen and the archers. And what we have to do is gently make our way through the level to the entrance of Moria, where we have our first boss of the game, the Watcher. It's a very simple boss design. Once you know what to do, it can be defeated in less than 2 minutes. So every so often you get tentacle attacks. You have to parry those and attack the tentacles once they're shaking. If you do that, then the Watcher's head will come out of the water. Simply shoot it with an arrow. Rinse and repeat this a few times.
Speak, friend, and enter. Melon.
Do you know how easy this is for me? Do you have any fucking idea how easy this is? This is a fucking joke. And I'm sorry you can't do this. I really am, because I wouldn't have to fucking sit here and watch you fumble around and fuck it up.
Now that we're a couple of levels into the game, it's time to talk about one of the areas of wasted potential. The combos. It's not as if all of the combos in the game don't work. They absolutely do. But the more you use them, the more you realise that the simpler ones are the ones you're going to be using all of the time. Especially in later combat areas, you're going to be wanting to use combinations that are easy to pull off and execute quickly. It very quickly becomes apparent to you that you'll waste your time if you memorise all of the combos. So especially with the later levels, your best bet is either the AYAA combo or the Bane moves if there are single enemies. What's a real shame about this is that the combo animations are actually quite stunning. But unfortunately, especially with the longer combinations, they leave you wide open to attack. Or worse yet, they have a long wind-up time, leading you to getting hit before you can even attack the enemies. So Gandalf is here, but he doesn't help very much, and almost immediately fucks off once the level is over. This is our first level with an experience of a lot of enemies at once. It's one of my favourites back in the day. Plenty of action, no truly frustrating enemies. We can really enjoy this combat as there's mostly unshielded enemies here, meaning we get to mash that A button a lot or fire off a lot of arrows. It's not too long before we get launched into a cutscene and our main prize of the level arrives in all of its glorious 480p fashion. So with this guy, strong combos involving the Y button do work best. Arrows also are helpful, but you might want to save those for the next phase. Once you do enough damage, the boss gains a chain whip, and you start the next part of the battle up above. What you need to do is hide behind a pillar while the troll attacks. Once he stops attacking, you can just attack him with arrows yourself. Also watch out for the occasional enemy on the left hand side. The troll eventually does die and we move on. In fact, we move on rather quickly. Gandalf slips and falls down a hole. These two elves make Boromir feel incredibly guilty, and we swiftly make our way to... Okay, Frodo and Sam have had enough of all the fellowship drama, and they've rightly taken themselves off on their own journey to Mount Doom. The three main characters therefore have to take on the Uruk-hai at Amon Hen. Alright, this level is all about body count, and completing the level fast enough for the patented Frodo meter in the top right not to run out. I was not really expecting alerts to appear in the Two Tower video game. For a title that misses out on so many characters from the films, to spot him here is a treat. So we're introduced to Uruk-hai in the form of basic foot soldiers and archers. As we battle our way through the level, hopefully mowing down the requisite number of enemies, you may get some archers throwing firebombs at you. All you need to do is hide behind the rock and shoot them back. Very easy. We eventually come to a bridge where we meet and fight alongside the other two main characters in the game. It's one of the only times this actually happens. Enjoy it while it lasts. So Frodo leaves, and without warning, the Frodo meter inexplicably changes to a Boromir meter. There's not really much you can do here. Fight the enemies, move forward. Boromir still takes the arrows like an absolute champ. We can't mourn our pincushion of a friend yet, though. We have to defeat Lurtz. First phase is incredibly simple. Hide behind a statue, shoot him very quickly. On to phase 2. And bloody hell, what did they do to the camera? It's stuck now in this sort of zoomed out isometric view. Gives you an incredibly limited view of your surroundings. It also does a strange zooming in the further away you get from the camera. So the further away from the camera you are, the less you can actually see. Really brings the fight down a few notches when you're not only battling Lurtz, but you're also battling the game itself. If it's not immediately obvious, get Lurtz near a statue, he'll lodge his sword in it, and you simply whack at him. And then we mourn our lost friend. I think the frustrating thing with this game is there's a lot of passion that has been put in here, and you can see that and you can feel that when you're playing the game, especially if you're looking at the behind the scenes. You know, they had a close relationship with New Line Cinema, they were allowed a lot of access on set, and what they've crafted is something that feels like it's got that edge to it, that authenticity that comes across in the way they've done the cutscenes, the way they've done the combat, the way they've involved a lot of the features of the movie into the core of the game. But then as the game progresses, you end up with the last couple of levels just being an absolute grind and slogfest, and especially if you're a young person playing this game, you're going to be bored because you're proverbially whacking your head against the wall trying to get past the last few challenges, and it becomes very disheartening. You don't want to pick up the game again because you know that as fun as the first few levels are, the last 3 are really, really challenging, even on the easiest difficulty. And unless you beat those levels, you don't unlock anything else. You don't even unlock the ability to use cheats to make the game easier. You know, cheats being a thing back then. Plenty of goblins and shielded enemies to begin with, but then we come across my least favourite bad guy in the game, the Berserker Urukai.
And this is Jeremy, your only form of hellish entertainment.
Dude, if you do that again, I'm gonna punch you. I'm not kidding.
These guys are horrific to fight. Despite having no armor, they're incredibly tough to kill at this point in the game. They block nearly every attack you throw at them and can effectively stun lock you if you're not careful. Coming across these guys in any level grinds the fun to a complete halt. Every attack they can do knocks you over. At this point in the game, you're unlikely to have unlocked the level 8 combo Bane of Saruman, which takes care of these guys easily. So your best bet is to block at the last second, to try and get some sort of combo in that will knock them to the ground, then press the R button to finish them off. That out of the way, we walk around the corner and stumble across a wood troll. So the strategy with these ones is very similar to the cave troll back in Moria, except they can't take projectile damage. So what you should be relying on is running in, getting a hit or two, and then running away. You keep chipping away at them, they eventually do die. The next area, it's a bit uneventful, there's just a giant pit. Moving on, we come to an ambush at a stream. Take a look at those amazing 2000s era water shading effects. Sublime. We walk through and endure another ambush, but this time it's aquatic orcs. Once they're beaten, you enter the waterfall and another lovely troll greets us, followed by one more berserker. I'm going to make a bold claim at this point. Fangorn Forest level 6 of the game is actually the last good level of the Two Towers video game. It's the last one that has a good structure to it. It doesn't feature stupid camera angles, bizarrely aggressive time requirements, or huge numbers of enemies that make the battles a slog. So from here on, just be warned, it does get worse. We start this level with Gandalf in tow, and a new type of armoured Urukai to fight. There's also a vulnerable villager health meter in the top right to keep an eye on, but just keep fighting your way through the level and you'll just be fine. Gandalf does start the level by shooting some beams of light and also breaking down the door to the inn that is currently on fire. He then immediately leaves. You don't have an awful lot of time here, so work your way through the enemies quickly. Make your way through the buildings, taking out every Urukai you see and freeing any villagers. We thankfully see Gandalf again for like 10 seconds. The Uruks then shove some more villagers into a burning building and block them inside. You now have a second vulnerable villager health meter below the first. This one ticks down rather quickly, so get a move on.
You have done all you can here. The survivors will make for Helm's Deep. You still have work to do. I will come back to you at the turn of the tide.
So I'm now going to read you through a list of characters and plot points that do not exist in the Two Towers video game, but do exist in the movies. Saruman. Saruman exists in a little cutscene when they're going to Moria. Doesn't exist otherwise. Not a problem. Not a thing. Urukai are a thing. Saruman, not a thing. King Theoden does exist in a couple of cutscenes. He doesn't actually appear in the game. And also, there's no plot point about Saruman taking or trying to take over his mind. Wormtongue also doesn't exist. Éomer, for that matter, also doesn't exist. The Balrog. The entire Balrog thing. If you look closely, if you pay attention during the cutscene, you can see it when Gandalf's falling into the pit. But otherwise the Balrog doesn't exist, and Gandalf kind of just tripped and fell down, which is brilliant. Gollum is gone. Gollum is gone. Merry and Pippin. I think they appear perhaps a little bit in an early cutscene for Weathertop along with Sam, but Mary, Pippin and Sam don't feature beyond that. They just, nothing said about them, nothing really happens. That's that, they're gone. Ents. Any of Frodo and Sam's journey beyond Amon Hen isn't featured. But in a way, I guess that kind of makes sense if the game is from the perspective of Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, because they wouldn't have known what Frodo and Sam were getting up to beyond Amon Hen. So actually that one's alright, we can kind of take that off as being a problem. Faramir doesn't exist, neither does Arwen. She's gone. So out of the female characters that there's only a few of that appear in the trilogy of The Lord of the Rings, they've decided in the video game that also another female character should not exist as well. So that's gone. So on this level, Gandalf is nowhere to be seen. So you start this level, but you know what? I'm not doing it, and you're going to have to deal with that. We're going to move on to level 9.
I'm so hot.
Carmine, relax. Take a deep breath.
I can't.
Buddy,
I can't do this. We did way too much.
you can do this.
I'm telling you I can't. I'm so hot.
So just a little segue here. This part of the movie, Legolas does that incredibly cool but also weirdly looking acrobatic maneuver onto a moving horse. This shot right here shoots a couple of wargs and then it's never mentioned, explained or otherwise commented on in the movie. It's like something, oh yeah, Legolas can just do that, deal with it. With that in mind, I wanted to look up what the hell led them to doing that scene. As you may have guessed, it's a CGI Legolas, created and animated by Weta Workshop. What's interesting is the reason for it. Orlando Bloom had cracked a rib on this day of the shooting, so there was no shot of him getting onto the horse, and only footage of the Rohirrim were reaching him and him doing a little leap into the air. That was it. By the time they realised they didn't have the footage they needed, it was too late for extra shooting. So as a workaround, Weta had to create a convincing CGI double of Legolas. And they also had to do a handoff from the live Orlando Bloom to the CGI double. According to Weta Workshop's Matt Aitken, this is probably the first big double shot, and it was a bit of a turning point for the studio. Having to make a full-frame digital model that looks convincing enough was incredibly intensive. Quote, in 2.5 months, former Weta digital animator Christopher Hatata did about 35 different versions of what this action could be. He had Legolas going up on one side of the horse or using a stirrup to get up. Another version, he does a backflip or spirals in the air and lands behind Gimli. He also does one just as the horse lifts its foot forward, creating a sort of stepladder. If you look at the action they created from any other angle, it would look ridiculous. It would defy the laws of physics. I think Legolas goes through the ground at one point and also goes through the horse. He probably goes right through Gimli as well. Sorry, back to the level, the Gap of Rohan. We finally get a new enemy just for this level, the wargs with their riders.
Make them fear the wolves of Isen.
Potentially, depending on how quick you can beat this level, you have 10 to 15 of them. For the simple enemy wargs, you just shoot them and they go down rather quickly, maybe 1 or 2 arrows. But for the boss, wait until the warg rears up on its hind legs and then shoot it. He gets stunned. What you then need to do is just... You can't block him, so just move out of the way when he runs at you. It's not a particularly interesting level despite the new enemies, as the technique for defeating them is more of a time-based thing than a skill-based one. Now the one question I have is how close are we to the end here?
How close are we to the end here? For some, we spend our whole life wondering when the toil's going to stop. You don't want it to stop. It stops when you die.
Now, the final 3 levels, 10, 11, 12, they all take place at Helm's Deep, near the conclusion of the movie. Okay, so it's level 10 and I have some bad news. The vibes have dropped off a cliff. We begin this level at the start of the Siege of Helm's Deep. The whole mission involves kicking down various ladders that appear on the deeping wall which you are protecting. That's it, that's the entire level. You run around, you kick the ladders down by pressing X. You maybe fight some enemies, but there's not many of them. You'll notice we have a new UI element in the top right showing you where the ladders are and also indicating if there are enemies on the wall. If you get too many enemies on the wall for too long, then you get a game over. It's not particularly great gameplay design, and it ends up being incredibly punishing for those that have not figured out what they're meant to do yet. The game straight up does not tell you what you're supposed to be doing, or indeed how you're supposed to do it. So my advice is to run around a lot, kick down all of the ladders as soon as they appear, and focus on the area where your allies are not, as they're more likely to have more enemies. Also, your allies don't actually kick down the ladders for you. They merely attack the enemies that come up the ladders. So run around on the level as quickly as you can, kick down those ladders. You get 2 cutscenes during the level, one at a quarter of the way through and one around 3/4 of the way through. So these are your markers on how it's going. Other than that, pretty unremarkable level, not particularly good, and it only gets worse from here. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you think the Helm's Deep levels were going to be fun?
How do I get past breached wall? Basically, I can't get past breached wall without dying.
Can't beat breached
Often.
wall.
So I was
can't seem
wondering if
to be able to
anyone
bloody
knew
beat
how
the
to
sixth
help
to
or
last
give
level.
advice
Is
on
there
getting
something
past
you
it. I
can
know
do?
how to beat it, just it won't let me. I die too many times.
Stupid missions. The problem is I can't replay any missions I already.
We start with a few waves of bomb uruks, which you would have been introduced to had I played and shown you the Westfold level, but I didn't, so here we are. Honestly, all you need to do is keep away from these guys and shoot them with a bow. It's very easy. In this level, you're going to notice the door health meter in the top right. Keep an eye on it throughout. You don't want that to get too low. What we're going to have with this level is waves of enemies coming at us and heading straight for the door. So what you're going to need to do is sit yourself more or less in the middle of the level in order to run back to the door if it's being attacked, but also pick off the enemies before they get to you. Also, if you wait until enemies actually do reach the door, they actually stop, and at that point you can get your combos in and kill them rather quickly. If you do this, do keep an eye on the crowd and pick off any bomb uruks because you don't want them reaching the door. Don't stress yourself out too much. If the door gets a few hits to it, it can take a lot of damage. What I love about this level is that the enemies are focused entirely on the door and not, the rest of the fortress conveniently located just to the right off screen. We then finally get a wave of just armoured urukai and a single berserker, so you can kind of focus on the berserker to begin with. Hopefully at this point you have the combos you need to take it out rather quickly.
I think the biggest surprises are behind me. Dude, I warned you. I said I was going to do that if you did that again.
You then get a wave of archers. What you need to do is to stand back. They're going to target you, do a lot of parrying, and then you can march in and shoot them back. Very, very simple. You also get a cave troll at some points. The same tactics as per usual. Rather boring, unfortunately, with these enemies, but it does work, and it gets you through the level. And finally, you'll get the catapult part of the level. Despite the numbers of enemies here surrounding them, you do want to focus as much as you can on the catapult itself, using strong combos on the side and front panels with like Y attacks or charging up your Y attack is probably what you're going to want to do here. This level does represent a sudden spike in difficulty. It's the one that most people get stuck on, unfortunately. But beating the catapult ends the level, and we get this lovely bonding moment between Legolas and Gimli as they complement on each other over their ability to commit extreme violence. Okay, so take everything that was not particularly good about the last level and add in a bad camera angle, spammed enemies, so every enemy type thrown at you at once in multiple layers of enemies, as well as an even more restrictive health bar on the door. And that's what you get with the final level in the game, the Hornburg Courtyard.
To this day, the Helm's Deep mission in the Two Towers video game is one of the hardest missions I've ever had to do in gaming. Just unreasonably difficult.
So my question is, when I play this level, is there a god? If there is, this is a testament to their undying hatred of all gamers, which is very much deserved, to be honest. But this is the result of mankind's utter hubris. I mean, which one of you thought this level would be a good idea? A good final challenge? A good closure to the game? You were correct. You were correct, but you were too correct. This is too much, you went too far. The spite that perhaps some of the developers held for making this game really comes to the surface at this point. They were like, let's take the last level, let's slap the worst camera angle on it and cram in dozens of more enemies, and we're done. It's truly a slog of a level. It ratchets up from just a handful of orc enemies all the way to several berserkers being on the screen at the same time, alongside trolls and archers firing from off-screen, as well as catapults launching fireballs at you. There's no strategy here, there is just survival. Only pure, unadulterated focus and rage will get you through this level. And finally you will see the joyful end to the game. So, I've not been completely honest with you. I said there were 12 levels in The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, the video game. That's not entirely true. There's actually a secret level, one that's just kept out of sight on the select screen. It's the Tower of Orthanc. This bonus level is unlocked by reaching level 10 with one of the characters, and then completing that last, dreadful, Hornburg Courtyard level once more. If those Helm's Deep levels were a marathon, this is the pint awaiting you at the end. In a nutshell, this is a gauntlet or survival run. There's 20 floors of increasing difficulty, and thankfully there is never any other objective than survive and defeat the enemies. Completing a floor also tops up your health and ammo, which is a nice handout given the hell of the last missions we've been through. And you know what? It's nowhere near as difficult as those last 3 levels. Just a side note, Saruman here is not only animated in a completely unhinged way, but he's also voiced by not Christopher Lee, rest in peace, but by Jim Ward.
But none who can. You shall pay for your arrogance.
Jim Ward has many voice acting accolades, but of note are Captain Quark from the Ratchet & Clank series and Doctor from the brilliant Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. Sadly, Jim couldn't return for Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart due to suffering from Alzheimer's and COVID-19 complications. I hope he knows how much his work is loved and appreciated. In the Tower of Orthanc, there is no time limit. We are under no pressure. A great strategy is just to run away from the enemies, and when you're up close to them, use the Bane combos. Just to give you an idea, at the final level, level 20, you'll be facing 2 forest trolls, 1 cave troll, 2 shielded orcs, and 3 flame archers. Once they're defeated, you have a short cutscene with Saruman, and that's it. You've finished the game.
Is it over?
It's done. Yes, Mr. Frodo.
For beating this bonus mission, you do unlock Isildur, but his character is simply a reskinned Aragorn, and this is how the game ends. Not with a bang, but with a... The game has charm. It has that movie feel, bringing you the action scenes from the films and connecting you to Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. But those positives do take a step back later on in the game when you're faced with the slog of the last few levels. Having played it through for the sake of this retrospective video, I'm very happy to never touch this game again. It's unfortunate as there's so much clear passion that has been put into the game, and there are times when, because of that passion, you cannot help but enjoy the experience. Unfortunately, those times are few and far between when you reach the latter half of the game. I think this game has a bit to teach us about nostalgia. I so desperately wanted the Two Towers game to be exactly as I remembered. A perfect childhood moment, captured in my heart forever. But the reality is that this is a mid-game. There's nothing wrong with that. So what's the takeaway? Play the games and enjoy them while you can. Because once you come back around, they never hit the same again.